All right.
Mayor Jacobs?
I'm here.
Mayor Hickey?
Here.
Mr. Travellini is not here. Ms. Orabana is not here. Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. Rodelius?
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Here.
Mr. Walter?
Here.
Mr. First?
Here.
Ms. Christie? Here. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk, sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News, and to all subscribers, and posted at Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 6, 2023.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome to the March 9th Land Use Board meeting. Chairwoman Gutschall is ill tonight, so I'm going to be officiating the meeting in her place. At this point, we would like to open it up to anybody from the public who has anything they'd like to discuss that is not on the agenda. Nobody in person? Is anybody on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
We'll close that portion of the meeting. Okay, we have no minutes or correspondence or resolutions tonight, so I guess we can jump right into our master plan discussion left off from last one. You should have a memorandum that Frank sent us just this afternoon. Who'd like to start us off on this discussion?
Maybe I could say a few things, and then I'd love to hear more from the board than from me tonight. So, yes, sir.
You're on.
Oh,
You're on.
okay,
Yep,
thanks.
Good, Frank.
The memo from yesterday essentially says there are a whole series of things you probably want to look into, and we need to prioritize them because we're not going to do all of them at the same time. Just saved a lot of time on that one, right? The one from today, I think, is the one that probably bears more review, because we talked a little tiny bit about some strategies we might use not to have people in the R10 zone frequently needing lot coverage variances. I think Paul has frequently reminded you that lot coverage here is more than just impervious coverage. Decks count, patios count. Now, patios are impervious surfaces, decks, not really, right? But we count them because they change the character of the land and we call it coverage, and it is covering the land. It's also important to note that in the R3 zone, if you have a 10-acre lot, you can have 10% coverage. And we do that through a graduated scale that basically says, as you're down at the low end of the lot range, 3 acres, because we have lots of a variety of sizes in the R3 zone. If you're down at the low end of the range, you get more coverage because it takes more coverage on a smaller lot to fit stuff. And as the lot size goes up, you can lose some of that coverage, and it's still, but there's no magic to the numbers here. So one of the things that whenever we're quizzed about this is, well, how do you know that 10% was the right number there? We don't. But we developed a theory around the issue of protecting resources that looks to go to the low end of coverage as part of it, because we're trying to get groundwater recharged again and reduce runoff and all that happy stuff. You've been doing it since before I got here. So if you were to look at ways that you could change this really kind of straightforward, simple one would be to say, in the R10, you can go to some higher number than 5%. I don't really want to necessarily resolve that right now. I'd rather that we pick the strategy that seems to make the most sense. But the first one would be, if 5 isn't enough, give them some more. The second strategy would be, if you look at the definition of lot coverage, should decks be in there? We've heard some suggestions that maybe we would exempt the 200 feet of driveway that you have to have because of the enhanced setback. There are processes for discounting certain things. A paved road is 100% impervious, but an unpaved road is not impervious, it's less impervious. I'm really lousing this one up. What I'm really trying to say is maybe there might be a factor like 75% rather than 100% that you would count the coverage from an unpaved driveway. And I'm saying here that there are engineering aspects to this that we're really going to need Paul to weigh in on, and I didn't give him a chance to do that today. But I do think that as we, philosophically, let's pick the one that you think makes the most sense and we can go in to do something with that. The second alternative would be to take things out of that definition of lot coverage somehow. If you took out all of the unpaved road surfaces or driveways, that would allow a tremendous amount of coverage, probably more than you'd want to allow, right? Because people could pretty much put those unpaved roads any place they want. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. But there might be things like decks that you could exempt. We've heard the argument that pools aren't impervious because the water lands in the pool. It doesn't get.
It's creative for
if
about
it
6
gets-
inches. and
If
then
it
it's
gets
like-
into the ground from there, your pool has a problem, you know? So that's, the redefining lot coverage would be the second way to look at that. And I did go to a little bit of detail about, if we look at a hypothetical, what does it take to get what somebody might want on a residential lot with just the things that you permit in your ordinance? My little footnote on the back, and we can throw darts at these numbers and argue that all night, but you get the sense that it's not unlikely that about a half an acre of coverage would be needed for somebody that would have a tennis court, would have a patio, a deck, a pool, deck around the pool, all that stuff. And again, I think Paul would look at these numbers, he could probably say too low, too high, and I would respect that, and we could look at that more. But the real point here is, if it takes almost all the coverage you get on a 10-acre lot to do what's typical, and then if you want to have a equestrian arena, that uses up all your coverage before you even do any of this stuff. Does that invoke some different treatment for certainly the property where the arena goes? I mean, if we want to encourage agriculture, and we like equine agriculture, and as a community, as a culture here, that's been something that's embedded in your agricultural past and hopefully your future. People have talked that way for a long time. So, we have to think about why you would give a free pass for something because it really performs in a way you wanted it to. So you all, in this third alternative, you might, like I said before, discount certain things or exempt. So you exempt the deck and you say that the unpaved driveways count for some percentage that Paul will tell you because he's probably got the number in his head already. But that would be a way where on every plan, the calculations would be made to show how those factors were each. Right now, they just all get identified as a line item. They'd be identified and then factored by either one or something less than one into the formula of showing what the talk. What do you think?
When you're done, are you done?
I guess
It's
it
5
is.
minutes late and it's 13 minutes after. Come on, man. We're starting.
No,
Yes,
I wanna
as a
get
matter of
you
fact,
finished,
I am.
because I want to interrupt the board's thinking before they start to
Right.
talk, because I've
Go
got
ahead.
some very strong opinions on some of this stuff. It comes from an engineering perspective, and it comes from an enforcement perspective. Don't ever, ever, ever discount an unpaved driveway to be less than 100% coverage. How can we stop somebody from paving it after they've got their approvals? We don't know when it gets done. I require all the designs to be done as if it's paved. So if somebody wants to pave the driveway in the future, they can pave the driveway in the future. Unless you're gonna have deep restrictions, that means paving driveways, and then somehow find a way to enforce that, you're never going there.
It's a nightmare. You don't
Do
want
not even
to.
think about that. Decks are impervious. Sorry. Come look at my deck. It's actually made out of Trex, like a lot of the ones are in the R10 zone, and the boards butt right up against each other. It's impervious.
Wait a minute.
Even if it's 10, 8 feet off the ground?
Yes,
Why?
because the water doesn't hit the ground.
It sheds water.
What do you mean the water doesn't hit the ground? It doesn't sink into the boards?
No, but it runs off. It runs off, I'm sorry. It doesn't hit underneath the deck. It runs off. It's just like a
Slows
roof.
it down.
There's no difference in a roof.
Okay.
That's weird, that's
All
extreme.
right.
That's
You know what?
extreme.
I'm not an engineer.
Might take extra credit because the water's.
I will take issue with Frank's area of a tennis court. Actually 60 by 120, which my math comes up with 7,200 square feet, not 2,800.
See, I told you he was going to straighten me out here.
But all those things being said, there's two things that I would suggest. Number one, exempt outdoor riding rings. Right now,
Right.
arguably they're part of lot coverage. Throw them out, we like those, exempt those, and increase the permitted coverage. Let's do that.
Why,
zones are just 10 acres.
can I just ask Paul, why are outdoor riding ring impervious? Are they gravel or
Because
peat
they-
stone or something?
They're semi-pervious surfaces.
If they've got wait a minute, so are those driveways we were talking about?
Well, but
Yeah,
I just want
but
to,
a semi-pervious surface counts as lot coverage.
but I just want to understand, like, I don't even know what a riding ring is made out of. What is the material used for riding?
There's like
Outdoor.
special dirt.
Cinders,
No?
No, there's different materials, and
Oh,
the water
okay.
does run off, and
Okay.
fancy ones are under drained, and, you
Okay.
know.
But certainly if
And
you had,
they get pounded, so they become impervious even if they
Well,
were,
that happens to the driveways, but, you know, I look at a riding arena a lot like we look at a synthetic turf field.
okay,
It's under drained.
okay.
Okay, so, yeah, the water soaks in, but it immediately runs off. So it's just like it's paved.
It's not going straight down.
Is it possible to do what you're talking about by increasing the lot coverage, but if you have 10 acres, it only gets increased by a little bit? You know, if you have 50 acres, you can increase it by a lot more. But if you only have like one of those odd lots over there in the R10 zone that's only 3 or 4 or 5 acres, that they really wouldn't have that same amount of lot coverage.
Well, there's separate standards that I was looking for here for substandard lots in the non-conforming lots in the R10 zone.
And there's a lot of them.
Right, but there are separate standards.
We give them
for much higher
exemptions.
permitted coverage.
there's an adjustment to the rules.
Not for lot
them.
coverage, Paul?
No, there is for lot coverage.
Oh, what is it let yeah, it's like a sliding scale, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
When the lot goes over 10 acres, by the way, this is almost never an issue. When it's over 10 acres, it's, even the 5% is almost never an issue. Because
Okay, that's.
you have so much acreage that you're getting an
It's not gonna
acre for
matter.
20 acres and, you know,
Okay.
2 acres for,
For these oddball lots, okay, if it happens to be smaller than a quarter acre, which you won't, this is just all non-conforming lots in all zones. If you're less than a quarter acre, you get 35% coverage. If you're a quarter to a half, you get 25%. If you're a half to 2 acres, you get 15%. If you're 2 to 6 acres, you get 8.5%. If you're over 6 acres, you're still a non-conforming lot, but you only get the R10 coverage.
Repeat that last, if you're over,
If you're over 6.
it goes back
to
to
the 5%.
the 5%, okay.
My suggestion would be, mess with it, mess with these numbers.
All of them, or just the over 6?
But realistically, we don't have many lots in the R10 zone that are less than 2 acres.
No.
We really don't. We've got plenty that are less than 10, usually greater than
So
2.
usually like between, the issues between 6 and 10, I guess.
The issue is between 2 and 10.
And none of that's affected by, well, stream corridors?
Well,
Or
no, there are not, the stream corridor and resource constraint adjustments only apply to commercial site plans or subdivisions.
So,
So it's a straight coverage.
okay,
I'm just gonna throw a number out. So if we were gonna take your ranges there, and you go from 2 to 6 is now 8.5, what are other towns doing? Are they like 10 and then over 6 instead of being 5 would be 8.5? Are those their numbers?
It's all over the place. It's literally all over.
yeah, it's all
But
over.
frequently pretty generous in residential zones.
Yeah,
25%.
No limit on lot coverage.
yeah, some towns don't even use lot coverage.
No, residential lots, no maximum lot coverage.
Byram has the same thing, no maximum lot coverage, but there's a lot of other standards that, and for Highlands Preservation Area, in Highlands Preservation Area, it's 3% coverage.
What have we seen for people coming in for variances? Is it usually around, when it's over 6, 8.5, 10? What do we usually see?
I don't think we've seen 10%. On the greater than 10 acre lots?
No, we're seeing a couple of points at the moment.
It's usually like 6 to 7, 7.
Yeah, eight would be probably the top that we've seen,
And we've been approving it, or like,
generally, yeah.
With controls.
Can we go through a couple anecdotes? I'm trying to answer that question, but it just seems like for a 5 acre site, right? That's 220 some odd square feet, right? And if you say 5% is the maximum, right?
No,
8% of the, 8% of the?
8.5
Okay. But
for a 5 acre lot.
if you have a 500-foot driveway and it's 12 feet wide, right? That's
You
6,000,
probably don't have a
that's
5 acre
6,000
lot.
square feet, that's 6,000 square feet by itself.
But you don't have a 5 acre lot.
Yeah, so you're not gonna have a building.
No, but even on a 10-acre lot, that's 6,000 square feet by itself.
I understand it. That's a different discussion.
Yeah, but a half acre of impervious on a 10-acre lot seems like a lot of coverage. I mean, look at all the numbers on Frank's report. I mean, if you double them, like, and we haven't, you've seen a few, and you want to make sure people don't have to come before you, but you haven't seen that many. There aren't that many people needing this variance. And frankly, I don't know how it's enforced, and I said this in the hearing, people build driveways, they build all kinds of things. They do not ask for approval. They do not have to come for approval. They do not have to get a permit. They can do their paver stones, they can do their driveway, they can pave their driveway whenever they want. They can build some more driveway. You wouldn't even know. If they're kind enough to come in and seek a permit, they'd complain about the cost of getting the survey done.
Well, there's a lot of other costs too.
Can we nail them when
You gotta
they-
pay for an engineer.
Can we nail them when they go to
lawyer.
convey?
You don't have to. That's my point is, people are just
They're not
doing it. And then when they want to put something in that does need a permit,
That's when they have a problem.
that's when they might have a problem. But what can they do then? To avoid a variance, they can cut out some impervious. And
I think most of the lot coverage variances you've seen are kind of unusual circumstances.
Or what?
Big looping driveways,
Unusual circumstances.
big looping driveways, okay, an extra lap going around. We recently saw that.
the one we saw.
Or one lot where he's got his driveway, but he also has a common driveway across the side of it that goes all the way the full depth of his lot to the adjoining lot in the rear, and his neighbor's driveway goes to his coverage. Those are unusual circumstances. Those are the ones that you've been seeing.
Well, would we count an easement?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of lot area.
If it's on the lot, it's
But,
counted.
but the easement would count on only the person whose lot it was on?
Yes,
The surface, that's,
It serves multiple purposes.
right, but it's on your property,
but if the easement,
which is why it's a great justification for variance.
if the easement was 50
Yeah.
feet wide, the coverage wouldn't be 50
So they're
feet
better
wide.
off coming for a subdivision, to get rid of that driveway.
Sometimes they do.
Well, the subdivision, or the driveway is usually the result of a subdivision.
Right, I understand that. It's the flag.
Do we make any, so what, I got a piece of land that's, former, farm. It was all farmed at one point, and I got no restrictions, there's no wetlands, there's no, there's no design.
You are a lucky guy.
Right? I've got 10 acres clear, I can do whatever I want in every corner of it. Somebody else has got 10 acres, and he's got maybe 3 that he can do something with. Do we attach the same standards to both of those guys?
You still get the same percentage of lot coverage.
Isn't the guy who's got all the restrictions worth a little bit more latitude? Because now he's got to make this intense development on 3
It doesn't
acres.
matter.
But that's when he comes to us and
No, but-
asks that permission.
But Rich, he still gets to count the entirety of the lot for this
You
calculation.
could put a driveway on the whole.
Yeah, his denominator is still 10 acres.
He's still got 10 acres, just like you.
I know he's still got
He
10
doesn't
acres,
have 10 usable
but now
acres.
instead of having this, I'll use a Don crossword, bucolic, right? He's got, I got this bucolic thing because it's all farmland. And somebody else has got his pool and his tennis courts and his, it's crowded into one little corner and it looks like caca.
With a side yard variance right near your pool.
Yeah, with a side yard variance because I live next door. But anyway, you understand what I'm trying to say?
That's a different subject. That's not impervious, that's the setbacks.
Well, no,
But if the answer is that's a reason for coming to get the variance, okay. But we don't give any
No, you don't.
we don't give any consideration.
It doesn't make it any harder or any easier. It doesn't matter.
that was really George's question.
Well,
That was George's question. Do
You're
the
not- it's
resource
not
constraints cut down on impervious coverage? And the answer is no. In your scenario, you're saying that if you've only got 3 acres of developable area, you should have less permitted lot coverage.
The resource constraints really just inflate the size of the lot so that those areas that need protection don't just count. In theory, by your example, I could have a 10-acre lot with a half-acre postage stamp up near the road. And I could jam in everything I could possibly jam onto that, in theory. I think Paul's suggestion that we keep it simple is a really good one. I think that you don't really need to change the definition under that. If you pick the number like 7.5 or 8%, it probably covers the multitude of sins we'd be worried about, and that'd be the end of this conversation. And I wouldn't argue against that.
I tend to agree with that, rather than the piecemeal thing and all the percentages, and just across the board, bring it up, make it more easier for residents to kind of do the things they want to do.
Nobody's going to sue you for making it more
No, the
generous.
The Highlands Police will sue.
So increase just the over 6 or the 2, are we changing now
Well,
to a 2?
I would change the R10 conforming lots, okay, to maybe 7.5%. And change this where it says 2 acres to less than 6, I would say 2 acres to less than 10, and make that 8.5%.
So 2 to 10, 8.5. And then over 10.
Yeah, and this is where you have an issue, because the line goes like this. You know, if you've got 9.9 acres, you get more coverage than a person with 10.1 acres.
Yeah, let us,
And it's like taxes, right?
let us
Yeah.
wordsmith that part a little bit, because he's got the right idea, but I think dumping everything from 2 to 10 into the same category creates a problem that we can avoid, that we've already done something about in other parts of the ordinance. So we'll come back with the nominal change to a conforming lot to 7.5%, and the treatment of those other lots below 10 acres in some theory that we'll advance to you.
And I like his idea about excluding certain
The
uses
riding ring
entirely.
or the-
Yeah, I would do that. I would exclude outdoor riding arenas.
So that
That
it
makes
promotes
sense.
them.
So it promotes them,
Yeah.
doesn't penalize people for them.
Yeah, only outdoors, obviously. If
Only-
it's got a
only
roof,
Yeah.
it's a building, and they come here for the variance.
And can we do a look back to the last few applications? I remember the River House went up about what? Almost to 7%, or was it over?
That was a substandard lot too.
Oh, that's right. The Goldman application, I just want to make sure that we put these numbers in place, they're actually going to work. So if we can just take a look at the last few applications.
Yeah, we can see what those lot coverages were.
Right.
So just understand, exclude arenas, and then we're gonna create a 2 to 10?
Well, that's what Frank and I were gonna work on.
Okay.
I mean, there may be another step in there. There might be 2 to 6 and then 6 to 10.
Yeah, and we have to really look at
There is now.
other places in the ordinance where we've scaled things like that, so that if you were in a different zone where you would get twice as much coverage, I better have a good he better have a good reason for that.
I have a question.
We'll take a look at
This whole thing about decks. If the water runs on, comes from the sky, goes on the deck, it has to go somewhere else. It doesn't stay on the deck. So I don't understand why that's not like a partial.
Because it's like a roof.
It's like a roof.
It's like a roof.
So if we-
Everything runs off the roof and goes on the ground too.
No, you've got a roof and gutters and, drains and all that stuff. You don't have roofs and gutters, you don't have gutters and drains.
But you don't always have roofs, you don't always have gutters and downspouts on houses.
If your deck is built properly, it's gonna drain. It's gonna have some pitch to it so that the water doesn't just sit there. And if it does that, he's right. And if they're really close together boards, then it's just about no water dripping through, so. I have
So
to
if you're
concede
redirecting
that.
the same water to some other part of
Yeah, but that's what impervious
That's
coverage is that.
that's what
That's all
it's all
impervious
about,
is.
because
And then the definition of impervious.
Part of the theory of limiting it is because it concentrates
That's a little weird.
stormwater.
Yeah,
It isn't, and by the way, it isn't just the stormwater. Part of the whole idea of impervious coverage is the reverse. What's green space? So the green space in the R10 is now 95%. Maybe you're gonna make it 93.5%. Maybe you're gonna make it 92%. But that's the goal of the low impervious coverage, green appearance. That's what you have. That's what you have in Bedminster. That's what you have in the R10. And you know it because you love it. But the way it happens is the 10 acre plus the 7 or 5 plus the setbacks, the circle. Circle's very unusual, 500 foot of circle in the middle of a 10 acre lot. That allows for weird geometries of the lots.
But what if your deck is 15 off the feet, to Kathy's point? What if it's 15 feet off the ground? You might have a green space underneath the 15-foot deck.
You might, but
you might, but
you're
Yeah,
like,
you
we're not gonna slice the bologna that thin.
You have mud.
Don't make me do that.
right.
Yeah.
And Tom is 100% correct on this. there's the aspect of it of stormwater management, which in my mind is easy to deal with. But then the other aspect of it is why I like Bedminster's ordinance and I try to sell it all over the place. It measures lot coverage, and that's the amount of crap you have on your lot. Okay, it's really a measure of how much stuff you have, as Tom just said, the inverse of the green space. And that's why you want to count more than less. And because people come into me all the time. I got a pool, but I got a permeable deck. Okay.
That's not the only
Are
issue.
you going to change, are you going to be prohibited from changing that paver deck to a concrete deck sometime in the future? The answer is no, we can't do anything about that. So I don't like to play those games. And if you look at the DEP standards for permeable pavement, now I'm not talking about permeable asphalt, but for a permeable surface, like a permeable driveway, not to be impervious surface, it has to be 80% open, 80% voids. There isn't a structure in the world that does that.
And even, by the way, even when they built, they're proposing now some very fascinating paver roads with underlayment of gravel, like 3 feet of different size gravel. And it's wonderful. Theoretically, you don't need drains. Well, why is that? Because the entire road base is the drain, and it actually goes under the road and off to the sides. And they have to prove that it will be able to receive, the soil below will be able to receive the drainage, and that the drainage that comes under the road will not require any piping. But it's basically drainage in and of itself. So it doesn't really overcome the issue of keeping green space. All it does is deal with the stormwater management, which is just one issue. So I think the idea that you're thinking about it of a percentage, a higher percentage for anyone in the zones and some of these stratified arrangements is actually a good way to go. It deals with both what do you want to be green and how do you want to deal with the impervious. And by the way, people put impervious in, if they're complying, they don't put dry wells in. They don't have to prove that it
No, they do.
drains.
Well, if they do more than 1,000 square feet.
If they do, but I'm telling you that people basically put in bluestone, they put in pavers, they put in their own work, they change their material, their land, they do landscaping. They don't get a building permit for landscaping unless there's a building or structure. That's good, that's okay. But the flexibility of what you're thinking of, the 7.5, 8%, that gives a lot of freedom. It's not that hard to stay within that.
If you have a bed, a planting bed, and instead of using peat moss, you put dark stone on it, is that all of a sudden impervious coverage?
Theoretically, but nobody polices it.
It would be lot coverage under your definitions.
Okay,
Would like pebbles?
like if you put pebbles.
Yeah, like
Same
an example I
pebbles you
use
put
all
in
the
the
time,
driveway.
if your neighbor took out all his grass and put in green gravel, would that be okay?
No, I would not.
Hey, this is still America.
If you put gray gravel in instead of pebbles, it's
Is it jet
it's still
screen?
coverage, right?
Because Colin might be on to that.
No,
Exactly. Exception.
Exception for comment.
it's dark.
Same colors.
Bedminster green.
There you go.
A mulch driveway would not count.
Mulch driveway?
You putting one in?
No, if you had mulch.
Well, believe it or not.
Like we have, like on
Believe it
Miller
or
Lane,
not.
all the way through those walking paths.
If it's a motor vehicle surface, it's a regulated motor vehicle surface under the DEP stormwater rules.
Yes.
I don't care what it's made out of.
Yes.
It's grass. It's a regulated motor
Wow.
vehicle surface,
Even if it's made of grass.
even if it's grass.
So we're gonna,
But that's a different definition
Yeah,
from what
it's a
we
di-
would have
it's
here.
a different,
That's
it's a different definition, but, it's, yeah, we've dealt with it before where people run 2 strips of concrete up and have grass in the middle.
a ribbon driveway.
Yeah, it's like, okay. And what do we can't really say no.
I've seen ribbon driveways
I
as.
see 'em all the time.
That's a way you get around it.
Yep.
And your motor vehicle surface is the strip under your wheels.
The old Italian man in my neighborhood growing up used to do that all the time.
Now, there are places down the shore, towns down there, where they only measure lot coverage if it's more than 12 inches above the ground.
Oh, wow.
If it's less than 12 inches high, it's not lot coverage.
Oh, because everybody's got the ocean stone yards.
The ocean will take it back at some point. Yes.
With plastic underneath the whole, keep the weeds from
Keep the
growing
weeds
through the stones.
But we're not gonna change our driveway stuff, we're gonna leave that as is, we're just going to increase the lot coverage.
Well, I mean, I go back to the comment that Anna made a couple months ago, which is, could we consider accepting out or exempting from the calculation the setback area, right? So go back to the, whatever the setback is in the R10, are they counting, we're asking and demand, well, not even asking, we're demanding that there be a front yard setback of
So your driveway has to be at least that long.
Yeah, right, so you're already imposing on them that issue. Now, something that Anna mentioned, and I think we said that we would come back and look at it. I'm not sure if that's incorporated into this concept or that's still separate.
The answer is you could.
Well, I know we could.
I've seen some people do, but my suggestion is, let's just make the one adjustment. And when you don't get any applications for 2 years for lot coverage, you realize you really didn't need to do any more than that.
Yeah, once you make this change, if it's did 2% more, 2.5% more, the likelihood of a 10-acre lot needing relief is probably very low. And if they did, probably should look at it.
Yeah, the most important change you made was when you redefined floor area ratio, so the basements didn't count. Because that's where you saw a lot of variance.
So what was the matter that Colin and I were not eligible for? It's the, that giant structure on Spook Hollow, or?
We're not allowed to talk to you about that. Sorry.
We can leave.
Yeah, you can leave and we'll talk.
Yeah, that was a floor area ratio issue, because
That was
that's why, yeah, because that's why you guys weren't.
He had so many structures.
Yeah.
But it was not a coverage issue.
I don't think they had
I
a
don't think
coverage
so.
issue.
That was not the problem. Yeah, it was a huge acreage. Problem is floor ratio and multiple structures and adding some new space.
Expanding the house.
So Paul, could you do a graduated system where if it's 2 acres and below, from 0 to 2 acres, not that there's a 0 to 2 acres, but up to 2 acres, you get a base percentage. Your property is now 3 acres. You get the 2 acres as your base, right? So whatever that calculation is, then for every.
That's what we have in Collins zone.
In what?
It's a tax.
With
In Collins
Collins,
zone.
because that's where I said, if you do this, as we talked about before, 9.9 acres gets a lot more coverage than 10.1.
Right, so this way.
So what we
it's-
have
you
in
get
those
over-
other
you get over
zones
that
is,
issue.
yeah, we have a
We have it in the
chart that
end
goes like
already,
this.
Yeah.
rather than going up
You add
and
the
down.
pieces together, just like you're saying.
Yeah, so you're just, you're
It's-
You
adding
get
on.
more, but you get less of
Yeah.
more as you go up.
Right.
But you could apply that to the R10. And
Yes.
so I just have a quick question. So on Cowperth Way, where it hits Lamington, you've got, some small lots right there.
Mhm.
Is that the R10?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna imagine that some of those are certainly under 2 acres, maybe even
Yeah,
1 acre.
those are probably under 2 acres, more than a half under 2. They get 15% lot coverage.
Well, is there any differential for these large lots, 50 acres and such? The R10 applies to any size acre.
Yes, you still get the
All
same
the
percentage of coverage.
standards apply the same to what, if you're over 10 acres. Setbacks, circle, height, coverage. You know, when somebody subdivides, that's what I think George was getting at. When you go for a subdivision and you say, I'm gonna take 150 acres, you know, break it into 7 lots or something like that, then you have to do the constraints analysis. And your lot size in a subdivision typically has to be somewhere between 17 and 25 acres per lot to meet the constraints adjustments. That doesn't kick in, that constraints adjustment does not kick in for just a single-family house on an existing lot. Okay?
That was deliberately discussed at the point of when we came up with that ordinance. That it was specifically talked about. It wasn't to try to create the resource constraints to a single-family lot that was there. It was to manage the subdivisions. In the Bedminster Farm subdivision recently, you saw that, how those lots got much bigger because of the wetlands and floodplains on the property.
So I've heard some of the history of how that was imposed, and I heard it was not necessarily a clean discussion. Is that something that is unique to Bedminster and?
No, it's pretty common.
Pretty common.
Actually, it was very well discussed, I thought. I don't know who has that opinion, but it actually is, you get involved in this a little bit, Larry. There were environmental constraints ordinance that did not do it as a subdivision technique to adjust the lot sizes for the limitations of the lot. And those were criticized by the courts, but not the way we did it. And in fact, you have the 10-acre requirement for any subdivision. And if you had the perfect farm field with 200 acres, you have to build a road, but you could get 1 per 10 acre. You got the perfect land, you get the perfect subdivision. You have the constrained land, you have to increase your lot size. And it's rational, it works. It actually has resulted in a couple of subdivisions that did play out to be 17 to 25 acres per lot. So when people say to you, you know, you got to change the lot size or increase the lot size, I doubt that. Actually, you don't allow clustering, but you do require coverage increases. You increase lot size increases if the lot has significant constraints.
So as comparison, and I don't remember the application that was for the Kirby property, but my recollection that did not involve much in the way of constraints versus Bedminster Farms, which had a fair amount of constraints.
Well, there were not as many constraints on the Kirby property. That's correct.
And there were roughly 10, 11 acre lots that were approved?
So some of them were a bit larger, but that goes to what Rich was talking about, where you've got a 10-acre lot with only 3 acres that are good. Mm-hmm. Well, under our ordinance, you'd have a 17-acre lot with 10 acres good, and then 7 acres are garbage, go to you can't develop those. So you don't end up with those. That was the purpose behind that ordinance, so you don't get just everything in the one little spot.
And actually, some of the Kirby land lots were large. I think the average was actually over the 15 or something.
Oh, was it?
I think so, because the last few lots were very large, because they did have wetlands and transition areas and buffers. I forget some of the details, but and stormwater management issues that are pretty complicated.
And didn't they, in this new regulation, didn't they make those buffers and transitions wider and deeper too?
It depends on whether it's a wetland or a stream corridor. The answer is yeah. That it used to be just 50 or 150 feet on wetlands, and now it's up to 300 feet on the stream.
So my property just became less developable.
Well, it's going to be
not that really good one.
when the stream on your neighbor's property that's 1,000 feet away.
Not my little bullshit piece of property on Steeplechase, but if I had one of those estates.
When the flood elevation comes up 3 feet, and you don't know that it's on your property, that's when you're going to have a real problem.
What was the issue, and with Bedminster Farms, the distinction between the resource conservation area as a design criteria versus a bulk standard.
So if you were to, if it's a design criteria standard, it's a subdivision exception, which under the municipal land use law is in section 51. Which if you read section 51, it looks a lot like the affirmative criteria for a hardship variance. Doesn't actually state the negative criteria. That's why design standards and exceptions, when you do a site plan or subdivision, they have a little different standard. They don't have a notice requirement as well. Versus a hardship or flexible C under 70C, you have to prove the negative criteria where you don't under the other one. What you're thinking of, Larry, probably has to do with whether it's a density variance. And the answer is it isn't. In our ordinance, it's not a density variance.
But it's a bulk variance.
But well, or at least a site plan exception or subdivision exception to be able to have a lot less than the 17 or 18 acres that the constraints adjustments require it to be, because you prove that the strict enforcement of that doesn't need to be enforced on that particular lot. So basically, it's not a density variance of gross density, it's a variance or deviation from the design standards for how much acreage are you required to have for each lot. That's a good way to do it. You could switch things around, and you could go to no lot shall be less than so many acres and somehow make it a density, but our density is, density in the municipality is dwelling units per gross acre. That truly means if your zone is a 10-acre zone, that the maximum density is 1 per 10 acres or 0.1. Making them be bigger is not part of gross density. It's part of really subdivision calculation.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because I looked it up, that section on resource constraints is under general provisions and design standards. So it's not a zoning standard, so it would be a design waiver or a subdivision exception.
And by the way, that's why it doesn't kick in when somebody builds a single family house on a 20-acre lot or a 15-acre lot. They don't have to start subtracting their wetlands or subtracting their floodplain or subtracting their constrained land, bedrock, if they have bedrock. They still have to get a septic, they still have to get a well, they still have to meet all your bulk standards, even if they have that lousy lot that we're just talking about where you gotta cram everything in the front by the road. They don't have to get a.
I'm not sure I'm following you 100%, so let me rephrase it. So if I have a 100-acre subdivision and I want to do 10 lots there, okay? 10-acre lots. If by the nature of the character of the land and the restraints, whether there's streams flowing through it, et cetera, if at the end of the day, I still end up with 10 lots in that subdivision, I may have one as small as 6, I may have others as large as 15, et cetera. But if the aggregate subdivision is still meeting my coverage requirements in the plan of the solution, am I doing like carbon credits by borrowing excesses from the smaller lots, from the bigger lots for the sake of the smaller lots?
Either you
or
perform-
every single lot has to be
Either you perform
compliant?
as a lot or you get out of Bedminster.
Pardon me?
Every lot has to do what you're asking about.
Every single lot. Yeah.
We haven't written the ordinance to account for that. There could be circumstances where that would be a wonderful solution.
Because this is kind of the same approach I would like to take to signage. So if I've got a building that's got 20 storefronts, and every one's got to have, can have a 2x8 sign, or whatever the heck, the 2x4 sign, right? But my shop is 3 stores wide. Why don't I get why don't I get one square footage for each and every storefront to put on my storefront? But no, I've got 3 storefronts, I get the same shitty sign as the guy who's got only 1 storefront.
It's because you don't know anybody.
So, but it's but it's the same point here with a subdivision.
Nobody's.
Why would he want us to average?
Rich, there's actually a section of the ordinance that allows lot size averaging.
Yeah, that's a different subject.
It's a completely different section of the ordinance. Lot size averaging is permitted in the R10 zone, and you will never see an application.
Yeah.
We haven't yet, and I don't believe you ever will.
Just because it's too big of an enterprise?
Because, I don't know.
Well, couldn't the guy from
I don't know how you
Bedminster
make it
Farms
work.
do something like that?
No,
Because of the resource conservation.
with the resource constraints,
Because why?
it was a straight up subdivision. It's just some of his lots got big because all was wet.
It's not that bad, and it's good, but you don't really do cover, like, roads in a subdivision, you have to take those out, so it's never 10 out of 100, 10 for 100 acres, but.
It might be 8, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think you have a problem at all with that, and this issue about coverage is, it's unique to what you've been dealing with, and if you like the, 7.5%, that's reasonable. When you start.
But here, let's put it into practical terms that we dealt with. So the Bedminster Farms application. Do members of the board look at that application and say, was it 128 acres, 135, something like that total? Something around that line. So would the preference have been for 13 units, 13 lots, or what we ended up with, which was 7, 8?
Yeah, it was way less.
Because it was constrained though, right? They had a lot of things.
Yeah, but if we're talking about the application of the resource constraints, is that something that the board likes, or is that something that the board doesn't like? Do we have to delve into what is considered a resource constraint, and do we want to change that? Do we want to expand it, or do we want to tighten it up?
Whoa.
Yeah, man. That's plenty,
Where did
buddy.
that come from?
I think it worked great, honestly.
Okay, then.
It seems compared to, there have been suggestions in the past that there might be a move to a larger lot size. A couple of numbers suggested, 20 acres and more. This is a much more responsive approach to the land you've actually got, rather than just saying arbitrarily, you gotta have 25 acres, period.
And Colin and Tim also signed on to that.
No, we heard a lot
I know,
about
it was a blue ribbon committee that you guys were on.
We were beaten with that stick many times.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be.
There's many ways to do things. What you have is a very effective way to do things, and your 10-acre zoning, after great preparation by others, not me, and defense by others, but partially by me, was fully affirmed by the law division and the aptiv of this Superior Court. And you enhance that with the resource constraints adjustment in a proper way. So you don't have to go defend it anymore. You don't have to go change. You could change it drastically. You might have a challenge, but
Said another way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah, and this is hard to imagine, but your zoning is better than the Highlands Preservation Area regulations, which are so, and which promote theoretically cluster, and you don't want cluster. You never want cluster.
I don't know, Frank always talks about cluster zoning.
Yeah, well, we could sell it to you, but you don't want it. So like, if you don't want it, and Highland says you have to have it, why would you even opt in? Because they say theoretically you're supposed to have it. Well,
Frank, farming per se becomes less and less cost effective the smaller the scale, right? That's not a leap of faith. That's a fact of life, right?
Well, no, it's not, but I don't really want to debate it because I can't point to any nearby examples, but there are parcels as small as an acre that produce high-value crops that are sold to restaurants and other places where really exclusive stuff is.
All right, but is there a lot of that?
No, what, well, and is there a demand for a lot of that is the question. How many people are going to get that?
So my point is this, and generally, if it's not a secret to anybody else, I'm for less regulation. Right?
No, you're kidding.
So if these lots that we have all across the town, and I'm all for preserving the bucolic nature of the township, of course, but if these lots are no longer viable for some of those purposes, and someone wants to repurpose them and maintain, what did the guy from Bedminster Farms call it?
Agro neighborhoods, he called it a.
Agri-commune.
No, he called it some kind of agro thing, right? If that kind of thing.
We don't prohibit that.
What?
We don't prohibit that, okay? So like theoretically, you could do that. Even, people can do that.
But do we want to make it easier for people to do that or more difficult for people to do that?
You're gonna pay for it to be maintained by the town? No. You can't do anything more to make it easier. Somebody could cooperate with their neighbor and have a shared barn. I mean, things can be worked out if they want to work it out. But there's nothing negative about your zone plan or your R10 subdivision opportunities. And to make a mandatory lot size larger doesn't guarantee that it will be agriculture. It doesn't anything. There's no guarantee that somebody's going to farm. No guarantee you're going to raise horses. No guarantee you're going to grow, alfalfa.
Marijuana.
Well, if you allow that, it'll happen. But basically,
Indoors.
if you don't, like Frank said, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. I don't think it's broken. Actually, the density was convenient that somebody can't go for more than 1 for 10 acre. You can't subdivide 130 acres into 14 lots. It just can't be done without a D variance from the board. And that's convenient to tell people. But that doesn't mean they'll get 13 at 130.
Paul, can you talk about the accessory dwelling unit qualification, the requirements and the restrictions on that?
I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but it's maximum 1,200 square feet. You need 14 acres. You have to have its own septic system unless otherwise approved by the Board of Health. It has to come off the driveway for the main residence.
14 acres is the.
Yeah, that's the conditional use standard.
That was pretty good for not remembering it
It's a
all.
conditional use.
Is that all of them?
There's something
Did I hit
about,
them all?
no
6 or
rent.
7.
no
Oh, yeah,
rent.
you can't rent them.
And, it's a conditional use. So if you deviate from those conditions, it's a D variance to the Board of Adjustment instead of the planning board.
Didn't the guy with the
If
loop
it's conforming, it's
accessory
a
dwelling?
planning board site plan.
Are you familiar with what they did in Princeton with the zoning for that?
Was it for affordable housing though?
No,
Okay.
I don't know, I just saw it now when I was looking some, but I think, allow every parcel in Princeton to have an accessory dwelling.
Okay, so I'm not sure what they do in Princeton, but there are two mechanisms that are sometimes used about accessory housing units. One doesn't work very well, but it was a COA idea that was somebody who had a single family house could ask for permission and get an accessory dwelling unit on their property that would be creditworthy under COA rules if they deed restricted the unit to be used, rented or rented only and occupied only by an affordable housing household who was affirmatively marketed and not a relative. Some towns tried, people that live in the house are not willing to do that deed restriction. It's not very popular, didn't really work. But it theoretically is something that could be done. The other type, which is somewhat more popular, is called an ECHO housing unit, elderly cottage housing opportunity. A lot of towns adopted, throughout the country, a lot of towns adopted this. It's big deal, maybe in some other states. It's somewhat big deal in some towns. It truly means you can, for a relative, you could have a trailer put in your backyard, connected to your septic, connected to your well, for your relative to live in the house until they pass. Gets a deed restriction. Usually, the concept is a deed restriction that'll be removed when the relative dies. I don't know if it's really worked anywhere, but people act like it's a great thing, and some people think it's great. I don't know. I've never really seen, I've seen a couple of them done, and I'm waiting for the day when the town has to enforce a deed restriction, because I'm gonna be the person who's gonna be asked about it, and it's a little hard
The
to
theory is.
eject people, okay?
The theory is that you have a temporary need for this, so a modular temporary type building works fine. You can set it up so it looks a little bit like a house, but like Tom's saying, if you're required to put in a septic system, you're gonna probably be looking for other old relatives that can live in that place, but actually pay your rent at some point when your mother dies, because it's supposed to
And
get
who
taken
knows-
away at that
Who
point.
knows if somebody's your relative?
Right, I mean, look,
How do you
can go on to Realtor.com or whatever, and you can see cottage house or
Right.
blank house in Bedminster being, marketed for rental.
For party.
Right, or for parties, right, yeah.
Well, if you watch that show, Tiny Houses, they put them on, they put them on trailers and move them to different locations all the time.
And it's, in a way, maybe that's not regulated by zoning, because they're on wheels, okay?
Well, it
We
doesn't have
don't
to be-
permit
It doesn't have
trailers.
to necessarily even be a trailer. I mean, some of them, I think they make them on wheels, but some of them are on,
Yeah, I know.
they hoist them up on a flatbed. They move to California with their house.
Well,
So, Frank, are you familiar with the Princeton ordinance that George is talking about?
I'm looking for it right, I'm in their code right now, trying to find what, they call them secondary residence.
There's only one Princeton now. There's only one Princeton.
they merged, one of the few mergers in the state.
I think I did hear that.
Yeah, they call them secondary
Berwyn Township is,
residences.
Yeah.
And I'm not finding which zones permit them, but I'll find that and I'll report back on that.
When you talk about having a relative live in the home, it's actually quite easy to just have a single-family home and have some separate space that's not exactly an apartment, but it gives freedom of entry and freedom of use, and a separate little kitchen and a bathroom, and still be part of the same single-family house, and still be a single-family use. And that's so much cheaper than some of these alternatives.
So I was just asking Colin, because I remember Ron was talking about it at some point, and I believe it was a zoning board matter. Spook Hollow Road, the accessory dwelling, was it a home health aid? Was that the situation? Do you remember?
There was one on Pottersville Road.
No, I was thinking
Spook Hollow, I think
Spook
that's
Hollow.
the family member.
Oh, okay. It was a family
There was
member.
one on Pottersville Road.
Oh, right, it was like an elderly parent that was done, whatever.
There were more than one, I think.
Yeah, there was more than one on Spook Hollow Farm.
That was, a lot of these apartments have been there for years.
Yeah, sometimes they're pre-existing non-conforming apartments for a long time.
Yeah.
They're not even.
No, yeah, I understand, I get that, there's a lot of carriage houses that have been there before zoning came in, but I'm talking about the newer ones where, okay, you let the family member in, it's not nothing is permanent. Nothing is
I
permanent.
think that one said they would not rent it, I know how do you.
Yeah. That's a deed
Yeah,
restriction.
right. And then what?
They said it would, but it was already there, not like.
It was already there, but the reason why they ended up in front of the board, my recollection is, it was a pre-existing non-conforming multiple accessory dwelling unit, but they were expanding it. So they're expanding the non-conforming use.
So.
So what
we
there's-
go from here.
So once again, like last
We
week,
finished on-
what have we resolved here?
We've resolved, whoa,
I'm
whoa.
all for tweaking the lot coverage issues.
Yeah, we have resolved the fact that Paul and I are going to come back with a graduated scale that doesn't have those blips that make it ineffective, and that we're going to increase the overall 10-acre lot coverage to 7.5%. And that may end up, like Kathy said, as part of a gradient where if you have 20 acres, you get some, like you said, Mayor, you get some added percentage of coverage that's lower than the percentage you would get on the first 10 acres. We've done that. I sent something along that shows how we did that with the net habitable floor area, so that up to 15,000 square foot lot, you got so much, and then the amount of it went down as the size went up. So we'll come back with a recommendation for that.
I remember a line, and I'm probably going to mangle this line, that Steve Parker said, that there was this shift, for the anti-McMansion, right? People were building big old homes on relatively small lots. But in Bedminster, if you got 10 acres, you don't need a McMansion. You should be able to build yourself
Absolutely.
a mansion.
And a pool, and a tennis court,
Right.
and a nice driveway.
And so,
And you're not gonna have.
I remember that was Steve's line, you go from from a McMansion to now you've prohibited you got a big old property, knock yourself out.
How big are those lots on Mendham Road? Because those houses have to be 25,000 square feet.
Could be. If you have enough acreage, isn't there somebody?
But
that-
even the floor plan, even the first floor
I
plan's
hear
got to
you.
be 10,000.
What's that giant house on the corner of Holland and Spook Hollow? That's ginormous.
I had a client that
Ooh, the
owned
clock
one of those real mansions.
on the
Does
bar.
that
You
have a
love a clock on
I
the
love
bar.
I love
Yes, I think that is.
Yeah,
Clock, I've
yeah,
already-
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, it's,
Van-
Jim told me who it was, and it
Van-
didn't sound familiar.
Yeah, it's like super wealthy.
The Vanderveer guy who
No. That's not Vanderbilt.
who owned the
Yeah, it's,
Devils?
Van
That guy?
Oh, you know the house I'm talking about?
yes, it's.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Giant.
Van Ryan?
What's that?
Van Ryan?
Yes.
Quickly, the question that was raised about Princeton, this is a unique provision. I've never seen this anyplace. As an accessory use in a zone where the permitted primary use of one-family dwellings, what they allow is within a one-family dwelling, rental of not more than 2 rooms for residential purposes, for occupancy by not more than 4 persons altogether, but only so long as there shall be no secondary residence located in such single-family dwelling, or in a secondary residence building pertaining to such one family. So apparently, they permit a secondary residence, and I can't tell if they do it in this zone on every lot, but they also permit you to go into your house. I'm not sure how big those rooms have to be for 4 people to live in 2 rooms. I don't get how that works, but we'll
So
find out
does
more
that mean
about it.
You can change your detached garage to a residential
Well, I think it
unit?
does mean that, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
think it
probably.
does.
And and Princeton may have there might be some political reasons why they've gone in that direction.
There was a lawsuit, I think a woman bought a empty two-family house, and I think there was an apartment that was there from 1973, and, they didn't want her to build it or something, and then, I just read it now, so. Yeah.
I think,
But there was a lawsuit, and the town said, okay, every district, you can have an accessory dwelling unit.
I don't know, maybe they have some provisions about
We'll have to get
no
into
separate kitchen. Sometimes there's creative ways to, a single family is not, by definition in New Jersey, is not people related by blood. That's unconstitutional to say that single family cannot be unrelated people. And that's been for 40 years or 50 years. It's unconstitutional to say single family means you're related by blood or even related by law. So basically, people can occupy a house as long as they share the same kitchen and bathrooms. It doesn't matter whether they're related or not. That's been so, like I said, for 50 years. So it's not as, unregulated, it's not as restricted as it might seem. I think looking forward, you're probably looking at, generationally, you're probably looking at situations in the future where people do try to share their house with other people and do try to get units inside a single-family house. And the question is whether towns are going to allow it. And so far, it doesn't seem to have happened in a wide-ranging way. but the violations may be happening because it doesn't take much to just live separately within a single-family house, especially a very large one. So, I mean, you look at some of these designs, they're houses with a separate bath for every bedroom, almost master bathroom arrangements for every bedroom, multiple kitchens in the basement.
In 1950, the average size of a new home was around 1,000 square feet, and it was occupied by about 3.5 people. In 2017, the average size of a new home was about 2,700 square feet, and it was occupied by less than 2 people.
I assume,
There's a lot of space hiding in houses that could easily house other people. The housing we really need is in those garages. But if every town ends up like Chatham Township, where the old bi-level with the 2-car garage gets torn down and a mansion gets built there, those people, they may have an accessory apartment, but it's for the maid, it's not for somebody to rent, so.
That's what makes it so easy for them to work from home, Frank.
I guess
I
so.
assume we're trying to solve for future development. We're not trying to deal with what would require a variance if they can before file an application.
Yes and yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's a little bit of both. If you were to raise this number, you'll probably get fewer, if any, coverage variance applications. Coverage. Might get other variants.
Do we want to get back to this, Ginny?
Yeah. Yeah.
What, are you back to the first page? The
Yeah.
one pager?
How many
Okay, so
lots
we
are you
resolved
applying for?
today's memo, I think, and we'll come back with the recommendation. And I think in terms of those items, since we've already dealt with one of those top 4 bullets, the question about drive-throughs may not be something that needs a lot of study. There hasn't been much lack of unanimity in opinion in Bedminster about, we had a Burger King that sat there with a drive-through lane for 25 years and nobody ever drove through it. They did drive
We're
through
never
it,
able to
but
operate it.
nobody ever picked up any food.
Yeah.
So
And that was a use variance.
the arguments that are usually made about the need for drive-throughs relate somewhat more to leaning on the aging of the baby boom. We'll be dead after a while, so you can't count on that forever. But they suggest that people will become less mobile, and as a result, more opportunities to drive up to your bank, to drive up for your prescriptions, blah, 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 make your life easier.
Well, we can get delivered now.
Yeah, and that's not great
Well-
with the internet and phone.
Well, that's very true,
And
honestly.
maybe it's worth those people getting out of their car.
So if there's an aspect of drive-through,
Yeah, come on, you're getting in the car,
Tell that to the fast food restaurants, though. They're acting like
Maybe it's worth
nothing
it.
can be without a fast food drive-through.
so if somebody
Tim
thinks,
can actually send his car to get him food without him even making it soon.
Does it
but I gotta
talk?
sit in it.
Does it talk too?
send
It
your
makes
car.
sounds.
It
I don't wanna
makes
start
sense.
with that.
Yes, and don't ask him to demonstrate.
The steering wheel's attached to
Yeah,
it.
just make sure the steering wheel is there.
It makes sense.
I just don't understand why we would allow a bank drive-through and not a food drive-through.
Well, that's becomes an essential
What's the
question.
justification for that, or what had been the justification for that?
You don't throw money out your window, but you throw food.
We have,
People, the trash and litter was one of the biggest reasons that people, and the noise that comes from the squawk box for any residences that happen to be near the place. There were reasons why
Extra lighting.
going, all that
People coming
nighttime
off
stuff.
287 to just come in to pick up
Most of them
fast
go.
food.
Our junctions are so inconvenient, no one does that.
No way.
But the bank,
Who gets on?
No, 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 no.
Have you ever been to Carlisle, Pennsylvania?
the bank drive-up is
You know what that
closed.
is? Yeah, you get off 81, and it's just like here to get on Pennsylvania Turnpike, and it's 2.5 miles, or it's a mile of crap. It's just drive-throughs and
Yeah.
it's terrible. That's what this would become.
So,
It's like,
I'm
Oh,
the
yes.
one who asked to have this item put on our planning discussion. Because I want to refresh the discussion, right? So it's not unanimous, the positions from the board. But to Kathy's point, if we allowed drive-throughs, Pluckerman would be Taco Bell, Burger King, McDonald's, blah, blah, blah. That's what it
Google
would
Map
be.
headquarters.
Because the questions that come to me when there are vacant properties available, oh, be a great place for Taco Bell. like to put a Wendy's there, we'd like to put, but we need drive-through.
And we need to tear down those two houses because that lot is big enough for my drive-through.
Yeah.
That he wouldn't mind.
So
Can't we
if,
just decide which zones they would be permitted in?
You can try, but the problem that you have is.
What are your commercial zones?
Do we have a lot of support for this?
Yeah, those are your two zones.
The other
got
thing
two.
we haven't mentioned-
We don't have a fast food place in this town.
Thank you. That's why I moved here.
We don't-
Do you want one?
No, it was here when you moved here. There was a
Yeah, but it
McDonald's and a
wasn't
Burger
drive-
King when you moved
It
in.
wasn't a drive-through.
McDonald's
And that's why
And it's gone. No,
Right.
it's because it doesn't have a drive-through, it's gone.
Exactly,
Now,
exactly.
The other
Both-
thing to consider is that 206
That's how we
is a
run them out of
major thoroughfare from south to north through the state. And, you know, I've gone to Quick Check and other times, there's just all kinds of characters driving through town.
Yeah.
We don't need them stopping. I'm sorry.
But, well, the other thing is, think about
There's
this.
all kinds of characters driving
the-
through. I think we
apparent-
should put a gate up at either end. What do you think?
Apparently,
I hope you let me through.
And maybe make them collect tolls from them.
apparently,
Those gosh darn interlopers.
apparently, given the fact
My
that,
goodness.
Is there anyone
given the
who's
fact that
drive-throughs?
both of our fast food restaurants went out of
Are you in
business.
favor of drive-throughs?
What's that?
Were you in favor of drive?
I don't think I think I might be the only one, so let's just skip
I think you might be the only one in
it.
favor of it. I was just trying to get a feel for the board.
Let's just skip it. I mean, I may be the
Well,
only
no.
one.
no, but I actually want this discussed.
look at it this
that
way.
When we're looking at the master plan, it can be
That's good.
it can be reflected that we had this discussion and the planning board decided X. Once again, it doesn't mean, doesn't need
So
to
if
be unanimous.
we're doing a redevelopment in AT&T. So we build all this multi-use stuff, right? And somebody wants to put a Chipotle.
Make it Chick-fil-A, then you'll have the
They
better,
don't-
you'll have
Chipotle
the
doesn't-
better argument with Chick-fil-A.
When somebody wants to put a
Right?
Chipotle or a Panera Bread there,
No,
with
make it,
with a
I'm telling
drive-through
you, make it
window.
Chick-fil-A.
No?
No. Here's the
Well,
problem.
the Chick-fil-A's are closed on Sundays. Keep
If
that
you
in mind.
look at,
Oh, I know.
if you look at the history of it, your drive-through prohibition has run 2 fast food restaurants out of town. And your drive-through introduction that you might allow now will bring them and more back, for sure. If that's your vision for what should happen in town,
I'm
particularly in
not
Pleasant.
suggesting we permit it everywhere. Can't we decide
The
which
bank
zones
drive-
they'd be
the-
permitted
The
in?
bank drive-through is closed at night, right?
Where are you gonna put it?
The
We
bank
had it
drive-through
last
doesn't
We've
make.
got a vacant friggin' lot on the busiest intersection in our town, and there doesn't seem to be any plan for it ever to be
Yeah,
developed.
but it's not yours. It's the owners, and they can do with it what they want.
The owner's not making any money on it because they
Don't
can't
worry,
use it for
but it's
anything.
not yours. It's not your job.
Rich,
to-
Rich,
to-
where
to-
are you?
to
But which
worry
lot are you,
about that.
which lot are you talking
What
about?
lot?
Yeah, what lot, Rich?
Rich, if you buy the property and you come in for a variance, and
I-
I get a vote.
I wouldn't have a
to put
dream.
Drive-through, I'll
I
vote
wouldn't have a
for it.
dream to. Because we want to collect tolls in this town.
What drive-through is Rich putting in?
I heard they want to
Rich.
drive through on Stevens.
By a show of, by a show
There's
of
no space
hands,
for one, but
Rich, where is this vacant lot?
I'm talking about Wyker.
Oh.
That lot has been vacant for 40
so-
years, since we
Yeah.
built the
Doing something
intersection.
now.
But
So
that's
it was,
nothing to do
by the
with
way,
it.
it was
There's no
approved
way
for a
I want
bank.
a drive-through.
with a
I'm not
drive-through.
going to-
let's do this, since the signs are gonna be so much
It has 2 prior
fun.
approvals, it has 2 prior approvals. I'm sorry that real estate is not very successful, but that's just the market, okay? So, but that's a good question. The question is, really, would you want to change the whole VN zone district to allow drive-throughs? And they think the answer to that is probably no. If you want to have one zone that is limited in scope and size at a location like that, then you have to do a master plan amendment to have a new zone and decide what, in the master plan, what uses you're going to allow in that new zone. And
Well,
Think about it,
we
think about it.
just created a zone for AT&T, it was one of my.
That's
By
exactly
a
right.
show
We
of
just created a
hands,
zone for AT&T.
That's
how
a
many,
bigger lot.
Why wouldn't we include that?
how many people
Kind of
are
use
for
in there?
drive-throughs, by a show of hands?
I'm the only one, you don't have to do it, I'm the only one.
So,
Janine wants to go.
sure, so let me
For lunch.
since it's not an application, let me just throw it hypothetical. Keepak Gladstone Bank came in and said, right, they came in, they want to move their bank
Yeah.
across the street
Yeah.
to the office building. So that would mean
That building's vacant.
That location that has a drive-through is vacant. Starbucks does not really like its interior units. Every Starbucks that's being built today, and the only Starbucks that are being built today, drive-throughs. So Starbucks in Bedminster says, like the McDonald's did, we're out of here. But there is a little parcel in the same shopping center that already has a drive-through.
Right.
We'll take the Gladstone Bank building and operate it as a Starbucks with a drive-through. And it's hypothetical. There's no application. I don't even know if this is a real thing, but certainly I could imagine the owner of, or the manager of the shopping center trying to propose that, or Starbucks and saying, we'll take that spot. Get us a drive-through. People and Bedminster residents, they love their Starbucks, right? So when Rich's hypothetical, when he's going Chipotle or something, you know what? Yeah, that's not gonna move the needle for Bedminster residents. We're gonna lose our Starbucks? Oh yeah.
Yeah, but
That's a little bit different.
what's the difference? What if Dunkin' Donuts asked the same question? What's the difference between the two uses besides the color of the sign?
Excuse me, I've already had this conversation with Tom about 15 times.
Well.
And he says you can't make the distinction from a zoning.
Not in zoning.
All I know, Lou, is that when we did Little League,
I may like the
we
taste
lived at
of
that
both.
Burger King.
Would
At
that
least,
happen
at least,
through
at least
variance?
twice a week.
And the Burger King didn't have a drive-through, and you were still there.
Yep. But they're gone because they don't have a drive.
If the
They're
Starbucks,
gone because they were,
awful.
and they were in a crappy location.
Yeah.
They
Right.
weren't on
When you
202,
got
they
20
weren't in a
minutes
shopping center,
from work
they were
before
off
a
Burnt
game,
Mills
You
Road.
need a Burger
Do
King.
you know why McDonald's left?
Why they left?
Yeah.
Other than they didn't have a drive-through?
They had a regional headquarters across the street in Crossroads Business Center. When the regional headquarters moved out, they closed the restaurant because they had to have a restaurant close enough to the regional
that was
headquarters.
only
That's
there as a placeholder, really.
Well,
I've heard that as well.
In Crossroads, they had?
Larry raises a good point, and two things to note. One is, a use like that, a structure like that, seeking the drive-through to be for a restaurant, could ask for a use variance to this board, not Larry and Colin, for a use variance to convert a bank to a drive-through restaurant, or even to build a new building at that location. And they might have a good argument, okay? Or an ordinance change, I believe that's a planned development.
Yeah, it's not the VN zone.
Zone, it's not the VN zone, it's different than the VN zone, it's really not quite a town center-like look, as you probably agree, although it has some features that are town center-like. Sometimes, by the way, it's very rare to have a town center that has drive-through restaurants. Why? Because theoretically, you're gonna park and walk to the restaurants and the bank and the other things. Do people walk? No, nobody walks. So, if you would like to have drive-throughs, you might think about that planned development commercial zone. A new zone somewhere, I'm not saying I like the idea of the intersection at Lamington, but that's your call. But that would have to be a new zone if you didn't want drive-throughs all the way down 202 or Lamington Road, because the VN district goes all the way down 202 and Lamington.
Tom, don't you run into, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you
much
run into-
about-
you
don't
run
you run
into
into spot zoning problem?
You do, but the defense to spot zoning is that you did the zoning after you did a comprehensive master plan amendment. That's the true defense to spot zoning, even if you did it for your best friend, even if you did it for Joe Schmo that you
And your
love.
favorite coffee.
Even if you did it against somebody that you hate. If you did, that's reverse spot zoning. If you did it in a master plan amendment way, where your comprehensive plan was amended, like AT&T property, to say, by the way, AT&T didn't mind that change, and neither did MetLife, right? They knew, they were supportive. That didn't make it spot zoning, because you did a master plan amendment with the help of planners to recommend this change and to make it in the master plan first. Then the committee did the ordinance. And so you could do that, and you could have multiple zones. I would say to you, though, drive-through restaurants in town centers are kind of
Buzz killers.
inconsistent with the whole concept, okay? And some towns do it. I'm not saying they couldn't or don't.
They're the opposite of walkability.
So
That much I
so if the Starbucks thing were to
100%
happen, they would most likely do it in the variance route.
Right, it would be a variance.
Well, I could, if you were game, I mean, you can look at that PD's planned, whatever it is, I forget. It's like a special district before Hills Commercial, right? They asked for a the bank went across the street and asked for a use variance to put a drive-through bank outside of a building. That was unusual, right? I never saw that anywhere, but that's what they wanted.
You could rezone
Could be used as
advance
a
and you
training.
could get like every franchise, there's room for
They're using
right
it
up
for
the
training.
Frank, I gotta tell you, we do a survey every year, it's called Knocking on Doors, and never once anyone said, you know what we need here in Bedminster? Drive-throughs. Never. And so you're gonna
Not
drive,
even in the hills, though.
never, and think about it, you're gonna
Right.
drag traffic into the hills and garbage into the hills?
Ugh.
No.
We would have enough of that.
So what are the two banks drive-ins, right?
Yeah, you have a conditional
There's a
use.
few.
I think you have a conditional use that allows banks to have a drive-through lane.
there's at least 3.
Larry, how painful does this have to get before we
Including
can
the one
move to signs?
Even the one that closed still has the drive-through.
But have we concluded that no drive-throughs, or are you still
You're the,
hunkering around the,
yeah.
you know?
If
looking
if the circumstances that warrant a drive-through can be demonstrated to the Board of Adjustment to their satisfaction, then it's entirely possible that there
That
could
gives
be.
you the control.
Right.
And then you retain complete control. As soon as you put it.
But does it compromise, and I understand that property is unique, but does it compromise drive-throughs outside that one permitted?
Tom will tell you
variance?
once again that all those circumstances of each application are unique, and that the fact that you approve it one place does not implicate the requirement that you approve it any place else. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it right. And to add to that further, there's this I like Justice Pollack. I liked him very much. He wrote an opinion called Medici. And in Medici, he said something which is pretty extreme. He basically said, commercial use variance is very hard to get. It should be very hard to get. It's really not necessary. It's not a special reason. It's not inherently beneficial. But if somebody can demonstrate that it's particularly suitable, they can have a commercial use variance. But when they get that commercial use variance, the next person seeking that commercial use variance should have an enhanced burden of proof to show why they should be allowed to have that second use variance when the committee, governing body, hasn't changed the ordinance after the first use variance was granted to allow that same use in the same district or in similar districts.
Which effectively rezoned that lot for that use.
And I don't totally agree with that, but that's the law. It's basically, it shouldn't even be a second use variance for the same thing if the committee or governing body hasn't changed the ordinance after the first one. It's a little extreme, but that's what Medici basically says, and that's why when you ask for a commercial use variance, it's really hard to get. And you could say no for any reason whatsoever, that you find it substantial detriment to the public good.
And impose
Find it
unique conditions that may
You
be.
say no, and then the remedy is a lawsuit.
And they lose.
Well,
Almost
But it's always that, it's always that.
But because it's so difficult to get, people aren't wasting
Yeah, a
their time.
denial of a use variance.
Actually,
is
what
not
happens
worth
with
appealing.
this industry is they don't even really want to go there if they have to get a D variance. So I don't mean to say to you that they're going to get this D variance. I don't know that they would. I don't even know if they'll make the application. But if you allow it-
if you just follow that
Right.
through. So, once again, hypothetical, I don't know anything, I'm just throwing it out there. P-PAC Gladstone Bank goes across the street to the office building, drive through with the nice big building, opens up, Starbucks applies, Starbucks is granted. Yay, we want to keep our Starbucks. 5 years later, Starbucks lease is over, and they're bringing in Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts,
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell.
No.
Sure.
Chick-fil-A, come on.
No, Chick-fil-A gets left. But that's one of the things, when a use
Yeah,
variance.
you have a very hard time, when you grant the use variance for a fast food restaurant. Basically, you are granting it for the use, not the user. Use, not the user. You're granting it for the type of use, not the tenant, not the operator. You don't get to determine the licensee. You don't get to determine the brand, and moreover, if it says, even if you got specific, it shall be a coffee shop and it shall not sell after 4 PM.
Rather than giving them a variance
You
that goes with the
can't
property,
say
can you give
it
them a
has to
use
be
variance?
Starbucks. You can't force it.
Rather than giving a variance that would go with the property, right? So when it changes over, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, the lease is up, whatever, can the use be personal to the user
No.
in some kind of use permit?
No.
No.
Zoning is,
The township committee does
that's a license. That's a license.
You're granting the right for that property to be used for that purpose.
Yeah.
Anybody can do it.
I think
Anybody can do
and
that.
And it runs with the land
Forever,
forever.
runs with the land forever.
That's why.
But I'm doing a project up in New York State, and I
They're crazy.
have to get a use permit to do self-storage there.
That's
They have a
probably,
different,
that's
they have a
probably,
different.
yeah, it's
land
probably
use.
something different. There is a procedure, we even in New Jersey have regulatory ordinances that are not zoning, like the license, the health license for the restaurant, the whatever, special use permit that the committee gives for certain.
For the outdoor
events.
dining or
Yeah,
whatever.
special events. Those things are not in zoning, and they are for the proposed use or for the proposed user. When you're dealing with zoning, both in the zoning ordinance and in the use variance category, you're actually allowing that use to be forever and to run with the land. Well, zoning isn't automatically forever, but if they get a site plan and they use it that way, it is forever. So try not to get confused by or think you can control the tenant or the user. And so you can't even be sure it's going to be coffee as opposed to whatever, burgers. That's just, and I think about it this way, if you allowed a restaurant and it was the Plucky and, somebody bought it and wanted to sell cheaper food, that's not zoning, that's not in your control. They don't even come to you for site plan approval. They just change ownership and start selling burgers. So that's the way it is. I mean, it's not so bad. I mean, you sort of have to think, what do you want it to look like? Think of it as you control the box and the location, not so much the tenant.
If you think about where it would be the least appropriate to have a use like this, any place in Pluckerman probably, and any part of Lamington Road, Main Street, Route 202, from the traffic light to Far Hills. Those are places that would just ruin the ambiance of the town.
Larry brings up Peapack Gladstone Bank in the Hill Shopping Center, but, right up the hill on my corner here, there's the abandoned Chase that has a drive-through that the restaurant uses for overflow parking. The restaurant uses for overflow parking.
It's only an ATM, it's not a drive-through.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's just an ATM overhang, there's no drive-through there.
Didn't they take the
But
ATM is gone now
but
too?
it's still a drive-through
I
function.
understand.
You're not putting things into your pneumatic tube anymore, but it still functions the way a
Oh,
drive-through
so-
functions.
It's just ATM.
At one
Yeah.
time, it probably was a drive-through, wasn't
There
it?
always was a drive-through, forever. And the pneumatic tubes are probably still there
They
underneath
had
the
a
ground.
window.
What?
I don't think they ever had a window.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Well, Rich,
Yeah,
I
but
mean, if
it's
you want to
not
convince the
garbage.
board,
It's not like there's food stuff and garbage and everything else strewn around, right?
And people aren't gonna get
Except
off
the
the
only thing
hard
that's strewn
highway.
around.
Well, listen, guys, I'm not arguing with you anymore. I'm standing here alone. I'm the cry in the wilderness. I get it.
No, you've got your name. Non-voting member.
Can we redo his name tag and say Richard Travel Libertarian?
He would like that.
Uplighting, what about uplighting?
I want to know, I just want to know one thing. I did not make a call. I pointed it out because we made such a stink for KRE.
Yes.
It really was, we talked about it for probably 15 minutes in the KRE presentation. And then I'm driving by,
Are you talking about lead or carry?
What?
You talking about elite or KRE?
No, I'm talking about KRE. We told them they couldn't do it because they had it in their renderings, right? And then when I drive by,
with their rendering, can I read you the ordinance?
The lights are nice.
What's that, Paul?
Lights are nice.
Can I
But
read you
you're
the
supposed to
ordinance?
not permit them.
Listen to what Paul's saying.
No, we're on lighting now.
Paul, go ahead, Paul.
I gotta find that.
Drive-through. Drive-through, this is my king. Wait, I seal the top. I seal the top.
Your mitts all over my body.
Hey, Jeff, do you have the gavel?
What's that, Yammer?
So I will read to you
Unbelievable.
section 13
Here's my king.
This group.
Drive-through.
Anyhow.
All right, let's hear Paul.
There you go. Here, pal.
13-504.1E. I'm sorry, D. Last sentence reads, building facade illumination is not permitted except for places of worship. Doesn't matter if it's uplighting, downlighting, side lighting, building facade illumination is not permitted.
Wait a minute, that light by your front door illuminates the facade.
That's a light over your door. That's not-
Go, keep talking.
It's the illuminating the facade of the building.
So it doesn't necessarily say uplight.
No, it says building facade light.
So downlighting is supposed to be for,
Signs.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and just, or for lighting the door.
Or the door.
Yes.
So when you go by Grace Fellowship, or you go through Pluckman Presbyterian, massive lights shining up onto the church.
Yep.
And they're allowed to.
Why that's,
Because it's not permitted except for places of worship.
any
We have it
rationale
on
for
my-
that?
Because churches were always quaint and illuminated forever. And I'm just telling you, when.
And they have the First Amendment on their side, too.
That was the discussion when this ordinance was adopted.
You don't need a
years,
claim.
churches will
We
be
saw
legal.
that a couple of times.
You don't need a RILUPA claim.
This is your code.
Religious land use and institutional.
Yeah, no.
Let me touch it.
And Paul, is that all zones?
So are
Yes.
we
But you know,
changing that or leaving that?
Wait.
We're discussing
People
it.
have lit up their houses.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell the
I
zoning
know,
police.
but I mean, you think about it.
Lighting solely for the purpose of artificially illuminating landscaped areas shall be prohibited.
As long as those lights are down by January.
So we're not enforcing that provision, but obviously it's not permitted.
So wait, so what's that again?
Well, then, I think that if we're not going to, I'm of the mindset
Don't
these
think that way.
days, if we're not enforcing things,
But we did enforce it. They're not there anymore.
No, she's talking about the landscape lighting
I'm talking about the
prohibition.
landscape lighting at this
Oh.
point. This is saying that you can't have any landscape lighting. I mean,
Yeah,
really?
That's what the
All
ordinance
all
says.
over Bedminster, there's
Can you read
landscape
that
lighting.
again?
Lighting solely for the purpose of artificially illuminating landscaped areas shall be prohibited.
Okay,
Oh, my
we
neighbor's
need to
got,
fix that.
my neighbor's got a light shining up their oak
In
tree.
other words, if the lighting is to celebrate Christmas, it's okay?
It's gotta be down by the 15th.
Since the
That was
LED
Telski's law, that got.
But then we're gonna have all
That
kinds of
made national
grandfathered
news.
lights.
I think it is probably in the
Cameras in my front yard.
between 92 and 98.
Yeah, so since then, all this LED lighting has come in, this solar lighting and all this other stuff, which makes that almost obsolete for.
I agree.
Well,
No.
I will argue with you because the purpose was to prevent sky glow.
Exactly.
Because all these lights just shine up.
Yeah, and have a neighbor lighting up their whole yard
And
all night long. And
Well, can't we still restrict lighting up the sky? If it's just pointed and directed at the building, it's not necessarily lighting up the sky.
How about to the
Because
left?
You
the
can do
LEDs
anything you like.
are that much
Which
more
side are you
directional now
on?
than they were, right?
I'm just reading what the ordinance says. You can do anything you want.
Are you for it or against it?
I don't want to divulge,
How about we only light up drive-throughs?
but based on my new middle name, you can assume how I feel about it.
Oh, boy.
So
Okay,
wait, you have
very
downlighting
good.
for signs.
Thank you.
But we're thinking about uplighting for the
And for
side of the
security.
building.
And for
which might have a
security.
sign on.
And for security, the downlighting is for security and signs.
Down. So the uplighting is usually like if you're going down 206 or anywhere, you don't want lights, lighting up the whole facade of the building because it's also then illuminating out. It's.
Well, here,
Like
I'll say it. It is not a popular opinion, but I thought the lights on Elite were bright, but they showed onto the building and down.
And up.
And they
And they
did
didn't
shine,
even
and they
make it
did shine
past the
up.
top of the building.
Actually, I think the building looked better with those lights than it did
They
without.
didn't even make it
I
past the
agree with
building.
you. I think it really does look very, very nice with that lighting.
And were they
I
on
think
all
a
the
lot
time?
of
So
places in
if this is
town
the
have
side of the
those
building and the
lights.
fixture was
All night
here,
long.
No.
No, they were on all
The
night.
glow,
Were they?
Oh, they were on all night long.
Yeah,
the top of the building, the glow didn't even extend to
Go
the
home,
top
Mike.
of the building.
They're still on.
There's just too much light.
It was
You
still,
understand what I'm saying?
I understand
you
what
can't
you're
pick and
saying.
choose.
So
what you
you
like.
understand what I'm saying? So on some of the one that was done for Elite, there was an up and down sconce.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
It shined down almost to the ground, and it shined up against the building, but the bat wing, which is the extent of the light, right?
Yeah.
The bat wing didn't extend beyond the top of the building, so it didn't light up the sky. It didn't cast anything beyond there. It was directed on the facade and the facade alone.
If that had been
But isn't that
at half
good?
that illumination level.
Pardon me?
isn't that good?
Okay,
That's a.
I got another one.
If, Richard,
There's three of us now, Kathy.
Rich,
No, I,
the level, the comment that we heard the most was that it was glaring, right? If the illumination level had been half or a third of what it was,
Yeah, and if
it would have been a softer glow. It would have called less attention to, I mean, it was just
If it was
way too harsh.
incandescent or old-fashioned spotlights, you have all those problems.
It really
But-
wasn't
well-
accent lighting, it was more like in your face lighting. That was the difference. I think it had less wattage or something.
Yeah,
Probably the
it would have made a
temperature
big
of the light
difference.
too, had something to do with it.
has
So
that been
that's why-
taken down, or is it?
Yeah, they took it down.
Somebody could,
Yeah, if you drive by, there's just.
Somebody
They
could
were
ask,
not getting their CO with those lights up there because they were
Yeah.
not on their plans.
somebody could ask for a variance in their
They weren't
site
on their
plan
plans.
And who caught that, Rich?
for that, and they could.
No, I mentioned it to Larry, but I did not call the town and snitch on them.
I got more than one.
Because I thought they actually added to the building.
So the question isn't yes or no on this one. The question is there room for us to want to look at whether the prohibition that we have right now is the right thing to do or something different from that?
You could do light color, you could do light temperature, you could do.
That's what I mean. Once you start getting into the details, you can manage
Right,
light.
and you can do
better.
time of day, right? You can say everything up until 11 o'clock
Who's
at
gonna
night.
enforce that? I mean.
That is
people
hard
in
to
the neighborhood
enforce.
put in,
Nobody
say,
enforces
It has to be a
anything.
warm bulb, but then they put the bright bulb in. We don't have bulb police.
You were the bulb police.
Oh, I was on it.
Not anymore.
You know it well.
So you have bulb police.
Is that what you
it's
did in the
gonna be on
hills?
too late, it's all different
You
things.
could have been in like some movie about
Actually,
the,
Paul
the
had to
home- the
enforce
home-
stuff
the
like
homeowners
that about the
association
bank,
cop.
right? You had to-
But you know what, listen, people are living in its tight quarters and you got a bulb, a very high intensity, bright white bulb, it's shining in everybody's window. It's
You,
not
you,
fair
you
for
know,
them.
he brings up a good point about the enforcement. Because look, in my neighborhood, there's a few houses now that have this lighting to, you know, light up their beautiful big house. It's not for the walkway, it's not for safety, and that's what this ordinance is about. And I thought, what is the best way to inform my neighbors about this? Is it to go knock on the door, say, look, here's a copy of the ordinance? Is it to mail everybody in the neighborhood something? But this is a serious issue, because there has to be an enforcement mechanism if we're gonna have an ordinance like this. That's how I see it. Else, it doesn't matter. So do you go to the zoning officer?
Yeah,
Okay, so.
that's where you go.
I think lighting has progressed though, would you agree?
Lighting has changed. I'm not sure I would call it progress. I will tell you this. I walk my dog at 5:30 every morning. And I recently had a neighbor move in, to put on lights on their garage that are on all night. I can't see the freaking stars anymore. It sucks. The difference is mind-boggling from what it was 2 years ago to what it is today. And
Did
that's
you
just
ask
one
him
house.
to turn it off?
No,
It's not,
because it's his house and there's no ordinance against it.
it's not.
It's like, you know, I'm
Yeah,
not
but
giving.
he may say, gosh, Mr. Ferraro, I never thought of that. Of course I'll turn it off.
Maybe after he spoke to Jay, the guy would be okay, but if
His
not,
dog is vicious, so no, I'm not.
if he just got home from work, probably not.
Yeah.
I think it's good to go talk to the neighbors.
You can try.
It doesn't hurt to try.
It's not that it bothers me, it disappoints me.
It's a battle you don't want to pick.
And there is,
That's what it
There's
boils down
something
to.
called architectural lighting though, and it's done for a purpose in a lot of instances.
I don't disagree with you.
but
right?
Rich, that's something that somebody could ask for in their site plan. They can say to the.
They
board-
did ask for it, we
I
said
know.
no, because it's
Well,
not
you
our
s-
rule, it's not our
You
thing.
said no to the
Has
facade
Mattel's
lighting,
complete-
but you said
Yes.
yes.
No,
You said yes to the
Yes.
Christmas bulbs.
But tell,
Here we go again.
Anyway.
over to us and said our light was too bright in our driveway. Could we shift it this way or shift it that way? And we
Said no.
said, thank you for telling us. We had no idea it was shooting, in the wrong direction. We had no idea that, okay, all we did was this, and it was just fine. As a matter of fact, when we go away, Joe calls and says, make sure you keep all your lights on, because I really like the look of them. So I mean.
Wait a second, Joe McCall's.
Wow.
Whoa,
Like
whoa. Wait a second.
How many bottles of scotch did you buy?
And this is on recording, so I know.
Oh.
He's probably watching.
Yeah.
He's one of the only-
No, really, I mean, it is.
He likes, so
He likes
he
our
likes
lighting.
the light, the uplighting, your landscape
Yeah,
uplighting.
that I'm not supposed to have that. I
Yeah,
didn't know I was
okay.
supposed to have. But yeah,
But
When they're out of town.
But I also think that's a progression of some thoughts, maybe not on lighting, but on the way people look at lighting issues. That it's not as prohibitive as we may have looked at it 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of the landscape lighting that's out there in our town is very beautiful. It's not bright light. Most of them are the solar lights, that people put on trees. I mean, and I think, Colin, your neighborhood's filled with a
Yes,
lot.
we may have them ourselves.
I know I do,
Let it be
but I mean, they're
all right.
beautiful.
I'm sure they'll
Let's get all these, let's get all these admissions down here.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know it was.
It's an opinion. They're beautiful. You think they're beautiful. Other people might not.
Okay,
That's true. And I'm sure this ordinance came about because it was being abused. Because it just got out of hand.
No, this ordinance came about because it was a state of mind of what else can we prohibit?
Well, they didn't like light.
They were the antithesis of the libertarian.
It was a
What year was
significant
it,
revamp of the lighting ordinance
You have.
with a
you do
high
have-
focus on sky glow and excess light.
You do have, you do have a tremendous focus on that, and you actually have some unique town center lighting that Paul helped find, which is downwardly directed, colonial or whatever, decorative features that are not highly visible from the side, which is, most towns don't do that. You do
Almost
that.
every application we get demonstrates those new lights.
But that's in part because your ordinance requires it, and Paul found a fixture that does it in a decorative way. You look elsewhere, you see the light in every one of these decorative fixtures. So things you have done have reduced sky glow. And, I'm not saying you can't change it. You can change it, but you can also deal with it on a case-by-case basis in terms of the commercial.
Has there been a lot of, I don't recall there being a lot of applications where people complained about the light ordinance. You know what I mean? Or were complaining to the township committee or the police or whoever about somebody else's lights.
But
Just doesn't seem to be.
we just made somebody take it down when they put it up.
No, but you're saying
Right,
that was
but it's never-
you're saying that was a CO issue, not necessarily an enforcement issue.
Well, yeah, because it was not part of the plans
So
that were
they had a
approved by the site.
TCO, but not give them the final CO until they took that down.
Right,
So
because
it's not, well.
it was not on the plans that were presented to the.
And
planning
there were complaints, right? And there were complaints. I mean, I certainly heard that.
Yeah.
And people were not appreciative and said, yeah.
But the people that live in the units wouldn't like them.
That's what I was
But it
saying
was
about
interesting, but
the
because,
upstairs people,
They
yeah.
were just on the brick.
No, if you had a second floor unit, it
You
was.
saw it.
It was shiny.
You saw it right in your windows.
but you know what? I looked at that and it didn't.
Right.
Didn't I?
It
Wow.
I thought
avoided
it
those
did.
windows.
I thought it did too, but
And because I thought the same thing, like, man, if you lived in that,
That's
if
what I
you
was
live
wondering.
above it,
You're never gonna
Yeah,
slip.
you'll
Right.
still see it looking out the window. You'll see the-
Or if you
you'll
live
see the
across the
source.
street, it's lit up a little bit. I don't think it's there. And, there's some good people that might live across the street.
he doesn't live across the
doesn't
street.
live across the street.
They allowed me to dim the parking lot like that.
Save you a little money on your power bill. Yeah.
I say leave as it is. They ain't broke.
I say if it's not sky glow, let's approve it. If there's no sky glow, let's do it.
Take it individualized.
So where are we with this now? What is our next move at this point? Do you need some kind of a motion from us, Frank, or to proceed? with the recommendations.
If you want to change, you don't need any vote tonight.
Right.
When we get Frank's draft on the purpose
Then we-
coverage, we'll ask you to vote. That's probably an ordinance recommendation to the Township Committee. I don't think that requires a master plan amendment. The lighting thing, maybe you want to think about it again a little bit more and just.
Well, I'd like to see what other towns do, and by the way, you can have different lighting requirements in different parts of town, right? You could say, you go down Lamington, I don't care, right, that maybe, once again, we're preserving something in the R10, and you might look at lighting in the R10 from the street view differently than you would in the village area. And so personally, I'd like to see if there's something we could crib from, some other town that may have looked at this issue before.
No,
And
I don't
possibly
think I've
a-
ever seen, too much on this subject. What do you think, Paul? I can't remember.
And we even talked last week about in the village, maybe looking at street lighting different.
Right, and I thought that was a.
Yeah, not many towns deal with this.
Every time I've been driving through Pluckman every day and I keep looking at those trees, man, they're blocking the view of the buildings that are there. And
Can you walk on the sidewalk without hitting your head?
I actually think it's an issue there. And I think your idea of doing the decorative lighting, I mean, essentially, if we had a bid, and we had a business improvement district that would then support that, that would be great, but we don't.
Well, you
And then
could
create
do
some
it by
branding.
zone, you could deviate, you could remove the restriction, and you might get it anywhere, including people just doing it. You could change the restriction.
You could put timing on it.
Yeah,
But I think.
it's pretty hard to enforce time.
That's an enforcement.
Commercial, but I think that you probably would, but then enforcing it, like, the zoning office not here at 10 o'clock at night, so he's not going out to give people summonses. So, yeah.
But I also think we need to look at low voltage lighting in landscaping. I mean, that low voltage lighting is low voltage lighting. It's not lighting up the sky. It's just pure decorative, lighting up some bushes here or there that are not allowed in our town.
You don't be fooled by low voltage.
Yeah, it can go up to 60, 100 watts, I think it's right.
All right, well, how do we
Yeah,
say that it has to be
I know what
a
you're, I know what
certain-
you're saying, but don't try to say low voltage, because
Probably
all
something in
all
that.
the LEDs are low voltage, and some of them are pretty aggressive.
Then maybe I'm using the wrong verbiage, but where it has to be low, we have to keep it low, that you can't have it be too bright. Because, I don't know, I mean, there's an awful lot of houses out there with it. And I don't think people were aware that it wasn't legal. And why are we not allowing it?
My landscape lighting has little hoods on it and only points down.
Don't admit anything.
So,
That's your worst weakness.
I think there's a lot of room for
Your
improvement here,
neighbors have all
for
written
sure,
to us.
Your neighbors have all been.
without being so absolute about it.
Yeah, I do think that it should be allowed.
I'll tell you, I love coming, River Road to Leomaton. And when I first moved here, it was dark at night. And it was nice, not seeing Dismiss show off their new, siding and all these, decorative lights. I don't wanna see that.
Okay.
I want darkness.
Isn't that a matter of preference though, Chief?
It is.
No,
It
I
is.
agree.
It is.
I-
All right, so it's like what she thinks is beautiful, what you
No,
think
it's
is.
different though, because the light, like Paul was saying, really can affect people in a negative manner at night, as well as the wildlife and everything else. And we're trying to eliminate the sky glow. So I don't think you should change anything to relax the lighting restrictions that we do have.
I haven't been able to find any lightning bugs lately. It's been very difficult for my collection.
Come to my house.
Did you say that?
We got tons of lightning bugs.
I had them all
You
summer.
know, but that's the kind of.
I
light you
live
like.
600 feet from 202, I get lightning bugs in my backyard, so come anytime you want.
No, I agree.
But as far as in the R10 now, in the, in the corridor or whatever, maybe it's a little different story, but when you have the lighting, the decorative lighting, no, keep it. just like the drive-through.
I don't think we're
It's the
necessarily
same thing.
talking about any
No
R10s though,
drive-throughs,
right?
no decorative lighting. Keep it. It's good. It's like Tom says, somebody comes in, they wanna ask, right?
They can ask,
They can ask.
and you could
Yes.
approve too. I mean,
That's just my thoughts.
I know, I don't agree with it, but I mean,
Yeah, that's
it,
fine.
that,
That's why
I
it's
don't.
good to have discussions.
Exactly, I think that, low intensity lights, is that I'm trying to, where it's not bright lights, I don't like all that bright.
It could be a matter of foot candles or whatever the heck we measure these parking lots at. et
Yeah,
cetera.
whatever it is, but that people should be able to enhance their landscaping on their property if they want.
Paul, do you have any recommendation?
Well, I'll put aside for the moment that I'm on the dark side with George.
Are we talking about lighting or something else?
I get a little concerned about a lot of landscape facade lighting in the commercial zones. Because
The
then,
commercial zones.
because the VN zone will get all lit up. It'll become very bright. It just will. Now, that's my concern, but I don't vote. Some low-level landscape lighting in the residential districts, probably not so bad.
That's what I was thinking about.
But, it's, at some point, it's gonna drive somebody like George crazy.
Well, and I'm sorry, I have to mention this. Somebody recently that moved into our neighborhood, it's probably 75 feet. They put in a new wooden fence. And every night when you go home, they have lights for 75 feet hanging off this fence, like a whole string of, like, light bulbs. You say, what is going on? No,
So
bigger
they
than
have-
Christmas lights. Like, great, and they're perfectly fine with, we're lighting up our fence. But
Delicious Heights has those, they've got those.
String lights.
Yeah, those string
You mean
lights.
those like
on,
Edison light
DH.
things?
no, it's
Talking
it's
about those
like,
Edison
it's
lights on
like,
the string?
like light bulbs.
Yeah.
Like,
Edison light
yeah,
things
big
on the
light
string.
bulbs.
Yeah, those are-
I
make
mean,
garland.
the string lights, the bulbs can be this big, the bulbs can be that
Yeah,
big.
The candelabra,
yeah. But it's just, it's not a.
I gotta say, I see those string lights on Delicious Heights, I think it looks great.
Yeah, probably not. for me.
They have it around their sign, don't they, that chain link sign?
You just hush about
That's also not permitted.
You keep that to your committee, you got a subcommittee.
I'm not on that committee. I just did all the, I'm not
All
on
right.
the committee.
Did we beat that one? Do we
We have no idea where you want
Can we talk about signs now?
Yes.
I don't want to talk about.
Yeah, we're not talking about signs, because you got a subcommittee.
Subcommittee's gonna come
right.
back and present to you.
Right, yeah, so we'll leave that.
Give us all the answers from the subcommittee, we won't ask any questions.
Right, I think we can wait.
But whatever you do, you gotta enforce it.
All right.
Sometimes.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? I think we could probably wrap this up for tonight on that. I do know that we have an item that we want to talk to in executive session. So if we can do that.
Yes, so I'll
we'll
make a
take-
motion, I'll give the board a motion on a resolution.
Yeah.
The motion is a resolution to go into closed or executive session pursuant to section 7 and 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege communication and pending litigation, Bedminster, 1525 Bedminster LLC versus Bedminster Land Use Board. The matters to be discussed will be revealed to the public upon completion of all litigation and appeals and the removal of the need for confidentiality. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
And a roll call, Janine, please.
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Commissioner Nicky?
Aye.
Mr. Crowley?
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. DeGenie?
Aye.
Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Aye.
Okay.
Now, do we have
So-
to shut the Zoom down?
Yes.
Now we have to shut the
Yeah.
recording
Yeah.
down.
Stop recording.
Stop recording and shut the Zoom down. Is anything?
Well, let's talk about the next meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, because I know we want to talk about this issue at the next meeting, but the first meeting is April 7th, which is the Thursday night before Good Friday. So I don't know if that creates a conflict for enough people that we should just have the meeting on the
Isn't it?
14th.
It's the 6th.
The 6th,
Friday is
I'm
the
sorry.
7th.
That's right. It is a 6th, but it is the night before
Yeah.
Good
okay.
Friday.
I'm out.
And we don't have anything, Paul, that.
We don't have any other applications, so.
So,
All right.
I mean, that's easy if the board wants to, just make it April 13th, I guess.
Just April 13th only?
I can't make April 13th.
Oh,
I can't make it the 13th, that's fine, but I won't do mine.
So,
you're lucky.
Would we even have a quorum on the 13th?
We need a quorum, and we need, actually, we need, we need three of the people who voted no. But at any rate, let's put it this way, we need, we could go again till May, I mean, it's not like it has to be, or we could try to meet on April 6th, and do we have everybody April 6th?
I can do it.
Kathy was
I'm
there
okay.
April 6th.
Kathy,
But
you're an alternate, so
Right.
seems to have more people, the April,
I think we try for the 6th.
Good idea.
okay. There's our answer, Paul, and,
Kathy will hand me her ideas beforehand.
Yes, I will.
So Paul and I should come
Like
back
Greg
with
Ryan
the
on that
recommendations for the R10 zone, then I'm out,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
For discussion.
that'd be good. And
So next
unless there's anything else, it would be a motion to adjourn,
Yep.
So moved.
and,
Second.
and this one can be all ayes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks.
April 6th.
We get to kill it recording.
Hey, we got some things done, knocked off the list. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we decided.
So, if you-